Welcome back to Bardic Sleep Stories. As the world outside grows quiet and the shadows lengthen, we return once more to the sanctuary of the past. Take a deep, slow breath, feeling the air fill your lungs before releasing it fully. Let your shoulders drop. Allow the muscles in your face to soften and feel the weight of your body sink into the comfort of your bed. You are safe, you are still, and you are ready to travel through time. The stories we tell here are long, steady, and detailed. They are designed to occupy the wandering mind with the gentle rhythm of history, providing a path that leads away from the worries of today and toward a deep, restorative sleep. There is no pressure to follow every word or reach the end of the chronicle. Whether you drift away in 5 minutes or 50, the story will remain here, a constant and calming presence in the dark. Tonight, we immerse ourselves in a grand and sprawling narrative. We shall set aside the haste of the modern age to observe the slow turning of the wheel of power, focusing on the textures of life, the echoes of ancient stone, and the quiet legacy of those who came before us. Our journey this evening leads us into the heart of a vast and storied heritage. We begin our exhaustive exploration of the Viking Longhouse. It is the deep, dark heart of winter in the 10th century, somewhere on the jagged, frozen coast of Norway. The world outside has been erased by the white silence. A blizzard of immense ferocity, a storm that the poets might liken to the breath of frost giants, is screaming across the fjords. The wind howls with a physical force, driving horizontal sheets of snow against the landscape, burying the rocky outcrops and the frozen streams under feet of drifting ice. It is a night where no living thing should be out under the sky. But here, in the lee of the hillside, a shape rises from the snow, defying the storm. It is the great hall, the Longhouse, a fortress of warmth standing firm against the crushing weight of the Nordic winter. The architecture of this sanctuary is born from the marriage of the forest and the sea. The Longhouse does not look like a house in the modern sense. It looks like a great ship that has been overturned and rooted into the earth. It is nearly 100 feet long, a massive curving structure that bows out in the middle and tapers at the ends, mimicking the hydrodynamic lines of a longship. The roof is not made of fragile tiles, but of heavy, living layers of birch bark covered with thick sods of turf. In the summer, this roof grows green with grass and wildflowers, but now it is a white, undulating hill of snow, indistinguishable from the ground around it. This heavy blanket of snow acts as a powerful insulator, trapping the heat of the hall inside. The walls are built of massive vertical staves of oak, blackened by tar to preserve them against the rot and the damp. These timbers are set deep into the frozen ground, standing shoulder to shoulder like a shield wall. Around the wooden core, a thick embankment of stone and earth has been piled up, creating a second skin that deflects the biting wind. The house is low to the ground, hugging the earth to escape the worst of the gales. There are no windows to let in the cold or the dark. There is only the massive wooden door at the gable end, bound with iron straps and barred from the inside with a heavy beam of ash. The storm throws itself against this structure, battering the turf and whistling through the eaves. But the house does not shudder. It is a masterpiece of thermal engineering, a warm-breathing animal of wood and earth that holds a pocket of tropical heat in the midst of the Arctic freeze. Crossing the threshold from the howling void outside into the interior of the hall is a sensory shock of the most pleasant kind. The first thing that hits you is not the sight, but the wall of heat. It is a thick, tangible warmth, heavy with the scent of burning pine and bodies. As your eyes adjust to the dimness, the vast interior reveals itself. The hall is a single, cavernous room, open from end to end, with no dividing walls to break the flow of the community. The roof is supported by 2 rows of massive wooden pillars that run the length of the building, creating a central nave and 2 narrower side aisles. These pillars, the high seat posts, are carved with the intricate, interlacing, distinct patterns of the era. Serpents biting their tails, gripping beasts, and twisting vines that seem to writhe in the flickering light. There is no chimney. Instead, the smoke from the fires rises to the high, vaulted ceiling and drifts slowly towards smoke holes cut into the ridge of the roof. This layer of smoke hangs in the rafters like a grey velvet ceiling, curing the timbers and keeping the insects at bay. Below the smoke line, the air is clear and golden. The light does not come from the sun, which set hours ago, but from the long fires. These are trenches dug into the earthen floor down the center of the hall, filled with glowing embers and logs of slow-burning hardwood. The fire is the spine of the house. It stretches for 20 feet, a living ribbon of orange and yellow flame that casts dancing, elongated shadows against the walls. It is the only light in the world tonight, a hypnotic, crackling presence that draws every eye and warms every face. The acoustic landscape of the Longhouse is dominated by the comforting, rhythmic sounds of the hearth and the preparation of sustenance. The storm outside is reduced to a dull, distant roar, a background hum that only emphasizes the safety of the interior. Inside, the dominant sound is the wet, heavy bubbling of the great iron cauldron. Suspended by a heavy chain from the roof beam, the cauldron hangs directly over the hottest part of the fire. It is a massive vessel capable of feeding 50 people, black with the soot of 1,000 meals. Inside, a stew is simmering, a thick, hearty pottage of barley, onions, dried peas, and chunks of salted pork. The smell is overpowering and delicious, a savory, salty aroma that fills every corner of the hall, triggering a primal hunger. Alongside the cauldron, spits are turning. Legs of lamb, rubbed with crushed juniper berries and wild thyme, are roasting slowly over the coals. The fat renders and drips onto the fire, hiss, pop, flare, sending up plumes of fragrant white smoke that smell of caramelized meat and herbs. The fire itself speaks in a language of comfort. The snap of a dry pine knot, the shifting of a log, the soft rustle of the ash. Occasionally a woman steps forward to stir the pot with a long wooden ladle, the liquid making a heavy, glooping sound. There is the sound of fresh flatbread being baked on hot stones at the edge of the hearth, the dough rising and browning in the heat. It is a symphony of abundance. In a world where starvation is a constant winter threat, the sights and smells of this kitchen are the ultimate reassurance that the clan will survive, that the storehouse is full, and that the warmth will endure. The hall is crowded, but it is not chaotic. It is filled with the orderly, cozy density of the clan. This is not just a house for a nuclear family. It is the home of an entire extended household, from the Jarl and his wife to the distant cousins, the fosterlings and the thralls. Along the raised wooden platforms that line the walls, the pala, the people are settled for the evening. These platforms serve as benches by day and beds by night. They are covered in a luxurious chaos of furs, the thick shaggy pelts of bears, the grey-white skins of wolves, and piles of soft sheepskins. The people sit cross-legged or recline on these furs, bathed in the firelight. There is a profound sense of industry mixed with leisure. The Viking winter is not a time of idleness, but a time of indoor craft. In one corner, a group of women sits with drop spindles, their fingers moving rhythmically as they twist the raw wool into yarn for the loom. The soft whir of the spindles is a constant soothing undercurrent. Near the fire, an old man is carving a piece of ash wood with a small, sharp knife, shaping a new handle for an axe. Scrape, pause, scrape. A younger man is repairing a leather harness, punching holes with an awl and stitching with waxed thread. Children are everywhere, but they are quiet, lulled by the heat. They play with carved wooden horses or sleep in the piles of furs, looking like cubs in a den. The conversation is a low, steady murmur, a collective drone of storytelling, gossip, and planning. There is no shouting, only the shared, intimate voice of a group that is secure in its sanctuary. They are a single organism, warm and safe, waiting out the fury of the winter night together. At the center of the northern wall, on a raised dais that commands a view of the entire household, sits the seat of authority. This is the high seat, or Ondveg, the physical and spiritual throne of the Longhouse. It is flanked by two massive wooden pillars, carved from the trunks of ancient oak trees that are believed to hold the luck of the family. If the house were ever moved, these pillars would be thrown overboard from the ship to lead the way to the new home. They are the roots of the clan. Between them sits the Jarl, the master of this domain. He is not the wild berserk warrior of legend, but a man of composure and wealth, a landowner and a leader. He is dressed in a tunic of fine blue-dyed wool, the color of the deep fjord, trimmed with tablet-woven bands of red and gold silk imported from the Far East. On his arms, heavy rings of twisted gold glint in the firelight, the arm rings that are the currency of loyalty and the mark of his success. He leans back against the firs, a cup of silver in his hand, watching his people with a gaze of quiet satisfaction. Beside him sits the lady of the house, the Husfreyja. She is the keeper of the keys, which hang from a bronze chain at her belt, jingling softly when she moves. She is the absolute ruler of the indoor realm, the manager of the stores and the weavers. She moves with a graceful authority, pouring drink from a pitcher of imported Rhenish pottery. The drink is mead, a sweet, potent fermentation of honey and water, flavored with meadowsweet. As she fills the Jarl's cup, the aroma of the warm honey rises, mixing with the smoke. It is the scent of summer captured in a bottle, a liquid reminder of the sun in the depths of the winter night. The Jarl takes a sip, the sweet fire of the alcohol warming his chest, and nods to his wife. It is a moment of quiet communion in the center of the storm, a tableau of order and prosperity that anchors the entire hall. At the far end of the longhouse, separated from the main living area by a low wooden partition, lies a space that is vital to the survival of the farm. This is the Fayos, or the byre. In the severe climate of the Scandinavian winter, the most valuable livestock cannot be left outside to freeze. The prized dairy cows, the breeding ewes, and perhaps a favorite horse are brought indoors to share the shelter of the hall. The sensory boundary between the human and animal worlds is porous. The smell in the hall is a complex blend of wood smoke, roasting meat, and the earthy, sweet scent of hay and cattle musk. To the modern nose, this might seem offensive, but to the Viking, it is the smell of wealth and warmth. The animals act as living radiators. The body heat generated by a dozen large beasts is significant, rising and drifting over the partition to raise the ambient temperature of the sleeping quarters by several crucial degrees. In the quiet moments between the conversations, you can hear the comforting sounds of the barn, the deep, rhythmic chewing of the cud, the soft stamping of a hoof on the earthen floor, the occasional lowing of a cow shifting in her stall. These sounds are deeply reassuring. They signify that the herds are safe, that the wolves howling in the mountains will go hungry tonight, and that the milk and the wool are secure. The children often run back and forth to the byre, feeding handfuls of dried grass to the calves or stroking the velvet noses of the horses. It is a symbiotic existence. The humans provide the roof and the fodder. The animals provide the heat and the sustenance. Locked together in the wooden belly of the house, man and beast wait out the blizzard in a shared, primal intimacy. As the meal concludes and the bellies are full, the atmosphere in the hall shifts from industry to entertainment. The noise of the crafting lessens, and the people turn their faces toward the fire. It is time for the skald. A man rises from a bench near the Jarl. He is not a warrior, though he bears the scars of travel. He is a keeper of memory, a poet-historian whose mind is a library of verses. He holds a lyre, a small, harp-like instrument made of maple wood with strings of gut. He plucks a few notes, pling, plong, pling, testing the tuning against the humidity of the room. The sound is bright and resonant, cutting through the murmur of the crowd. A hush falls over the benches. The skald begins to recite. He does not sing, but chants in a rhythmic, cadence-heavy voice, using the ancient alliterative verse forms of the Norse tongue. He tells a story of the gods. He speaks of Thor, the thunder god, fighting the frost giants in a land of eternal ice, a story that mirrors the storm raging outside the walls. His voice rises and falls, mimicking the crash of the hammer and the howl of the wind. The listeners are captivated. The firelight casts long, dancing shadows on the walls behind him, acting out the drama. In their minds, the wooden beams of the roof become the branches of Yggdrasil, the world tree. The skald weaves a net of words that captures the imagination, transporting them away from the confinement of the snowbound house to the glittering halls of Asgard. It is a shared dream, a cultural ritual that binds the clan together, reinforcing their history and their values while the winter wind tries in vain to drown out the poet's voice. In a quieter alcove, away from the performance of the skald, two men are engaged in a silent battle of wits. They sit hunched over a small, square wooden board placed on a barrelhead. This is the game of Nefertaf, the King's Table, a strategic board game that predates chess in the north. The board is marked with a grid of squares, the central one inlaid with a piece of whalebone. The playing pieces are carved from walrus ivory and amber, glowing softly in the candlelight. One player controls the attackers, a ring of dark pieces positioned on the edges of the board. The other controls the defenders, a cluster of white pieces in the center surrounding the king. The goal is simple yet infinitely complex. The king must escape to the corner of the board, while the attackers must capture him. The players do not speak. Their brows are furrowed in intense concentration. One man reaches out, his hand rough and scarred from the sword hilt, and delicately moves a piece of amber. Clack! He slides it across the wood, blocking an escape route. The other man strokes his beard, analyzing the geometry of the trap. This game is more than a pastime. It is a mental gymnasium for the Viking mind. It teaches the principles of siege, defense, sacrifice, and foresight. The click of the pieces is a sharp staccato counterpoint to the drone of the poetry. Around them, a few spectators watch in silence, nodding appreciatively at a clever flank or a bold sacrifice. Here in the warmth and safety, the chaos of war is reduced to a game of logic and wood, a contained conflict that exercises the intellect while the sword arm rests. Suddenly, a particularly violent gust of wind strikes the longhouse. It hits the gable end with a force like a battering ram. Thud! The massive timbers of the frame creak in protest, a deep, groaning sound of wood under stress. The heavy iron latch on the door rattles in its housing, clattering against the wood. For a second, the spell of the interior is broken. The skald pauses mid-verse. The Nefertafel players look up from the board. The spinning wheels stop. Every eye turns to the door. A thin draught of freezing air snakes its way under the threshold, reaching the feet of those nearest the entrance, a chilling reminder of the death that waits outside. But the door holds. The bar of ash wood does not splinter. The roof does not lift. The fire flares up for a moment in the draught, then settles back. The moment of tension passes. A collective breath is released. This interruption serves only to deepen the feeling of hygge, a concept of cozy contentment that will echo down through the Scandinavian centuries. The contrast makes the warmth feel sweeter. To hear the storm screaming in frustration, unable to breach the sanctuary, creates a profound psychological satisfaction. The Jarl raises his cup again, a silent toast to the builder of the hall. The skald resumes his tale, his voice a little louder, a little more defiant. The women pick up their spindles. The life of the Longhouse resumes, fortified by the knowledge that they are encased in a fortress that can shrug off the fury of the winter gods. The storm is merely the backdrop, the canvas of chaos upon which their picture of warmth and order is painted. As the evening deepens and the fire settles into a bed of glowing red coals, the energy in the Longhouse begins to shift from social activity to the rituals of rest. The sleeping arrangements in the hall are a study in communal warmth and hierarchy. The raised platforms along the walls, the pala, which served as benches for the feast, are now transformed into beds. There are no private bedrooms here save for the enclosed closet bed of the Jarl. Everyone else sleeps together in the main space. This lack of privacy is not seen as a hardship, but as a comfort. In the freezing dark of the north, solitude is dangerous. Proximity is life. The thralls and servants spread out their bedding on the lower floor, closer to the warmth of the long hearth. They lie on mattresses of stuffed Hessian sacks filled with dried heather and straw, which release a sweet, grassy scent when compressed. Above them, on the platforms, the free men and their families arrange their furs. The bedding is a heavy, layered geology of insulation. First, thick woolen blankets, woven on the farm's own looms in patterns of red and green diamonds, are laid down. Over these are thrown the heavy hides, shaggy sheepskins with the wool still attached, vast brown bearskins that still hold the musky scent of the forest, and soft reindeer pelts that are hollow-haired and incredibly warm. The families curl up together under these mounds of fur, creating puppy piles of humanity. Parents place the smaller children in the middle, sandwiching them between the warmth of the adult bodies. The heat from the fire, the heat from the animals in the byre, and the heat from 50 sleeping bodies combine to create a microclimate of tropical humidity. The air is filled with the sound of slow, synchronized breathing, a rhythmic ocean of sleep that rises and falls in the dim light, signaling that the clan has successfully retreated into the safety of the dream world. In a quiet corner of the hall, illuminated by a single sputtering tallow lamp, one figure remains awake, tending to the threads of the household. An older woman stands before the warp-weighted loom. This immense piece of furniture leans against the wall, a vertical frame of heavy timber that dominates the space. It is the engine of the Viking economy, for without the sailcloth it produces, the ships could not sail, and without the wool, the people would freeze. The loom is a masterpiece of simple functional engineering. The vertical threads, the warp, hang down from a top beam, kept taut by rows of loom weights, heavy donut-shaped stones or fired clay discs that dangle near the floor. When the weaver moves the heddle rod, these weights swing gently, clinking against one another with a soft ceramic sound. Clink, clink, clink. It is a sound as constant and soothing as rain. She passes the shuttle, carved from smooth boatwood, back and forth through the shed of the threads. Swish, beat, swish, beat. She uses a wooden sword beater to pack the weft threads tightly upwards, creating a fabric that is dense, windproof, and strong. In the flickering light, her shadow stretches tall against the wall, mimicking her movements. To the watching eyes of a sleepy child, she looks like one of the Norns, the mythical weavers of fate who sit at the base of the world tree, spinning the destinies of men. There is a hypnotic rhythm to her work, a repetitive motion that has been performed by women in these lands for thousands of years. She is weaving the vadmal, the coarse, sturdy woolen cloth that is used for everything from cloaks to tent walls. The smell of the raw wool, oily and rich with lanolin, hangs heavy in this corner. It is the smell of industry and protection, a reminder that even in the depths of the storm, the work of survival continues, thread by thread, inch by inch. Near the central hearth, a warrior sits cross-legged on a low stool, engaged in a silent communion with his tools. The Viking Age is a time of violence, yes, but it is also a time of profound appreciation for the objects of war. He holds a sword across his knees, It is not a crude bar of iron, but a pattern-welded blade, a technological marvel of the blacksmith's art. Strips of iron and steel have been twisted together and forged into a single core, creating a surface that looks like flowing water or the grain of wood. He is not sharpening it. The edge is already razor keen. He is maintaining it. He takes a piece of soft, oiled leather and rubs the blade with long, slow strokes. The oil, rendered from animal fat, protects the metal from the corrosive damp of the sea air. He inspects the fuller, the shallow groove running down the center of the blade, ensuring no rust has taken hold. The firelight catches the steel, sending a ripple of silver light running down the length of the weapon. Next, he picks up his axe. The head is bearded, the lower edge hooking downward, perfect for hooking a shield. The handle is new, carved from ashwood, wrapped in leather for a better grip. He checks the fit of the head, tapping it gently with a small hammer to ensure it is tight. Tap, tap, solid. There is no aggression in his movements, only a deep respect for the craftsmanship. These are the tools that keep the wolf from the door and the raider from the shore. Caring for them is a meditative act, a way of quieting the mind. The smell of the mineral oil and the cold iron mixes with the wood smoke. It is a masculine metallic scent. He wraps the sword in a sheepskin scabbard lined with oily wool and lays it by his sleeping spot, ready and waiting, a silent guardian of the peace he now enjoys. If you were to look up into the vaulted darkness of the roof space, above the beams and the drifting smoke, you would see the true wealth of the Longhouse. The rafters are not just structural supports, they are the larder of the clan. Suspended in the smoky upper air, safe from the rats and the damp, hangs the winter's food supply. There are rows of fennelar, legs of mutton that have been salted and dried until they are hard as wood and dark as mahogany. There are sides of bacon turning golden brown in the constant bath of wood smoke, bunches of dried herbs, sage, thyme, and mugwort, hang in fragrant bundles, looking like upside-down forests. But the most ubiquitous item is the stockfish. These are cod, caught in the spring, gutted, and dried on open racks in the freezing wind until they are stiff planks of protein. They hang in bundles of 20, tied by their tails. They have a faint fishy odor, but it is the smell of security. This preserved fish can last for years. It is the iron ration of the north. Along the crossbeams, shelves hold round cheeses, sealed in wax, and barrels of sour butter that have been sunk in bogs and retrieved to age. Sacks of dried peas and barley are piled high on a loft platform. To lie in bed and look up at this ceiling of sustenance is to feel a profound sense of reassurance. The hungry gap of late winter may come, the snow may bury the fields, but the roof is full. The smoke that stings the eyes is also the preservative that keeps the hunger at bay. The Longhouse is not just a shelter for people, it is a treasure chest of calories, a fortress of food built to outlast the longest siege that the winter can mount. As the activity in the hall finally ceases and the last lamp is extinguished, leaving only the red glow of the embers, the mind of the household turns to the unseen inhabitants of the farm. The Viking world is animistic. Every rock, tree, and stream has a spirit. Before he retires, the Jarl performs a small, quiet ritual. He takes a small wooden bowl and fills it with a portion of the evening's pottage, perhaps adding a dollop of butter or a pour of sweet mead. He walks to the darkest corner of the hall, or perhaps to the door of the byre, and places the bowl on the floor. This is the offering for the Tomte or the Gardvord, the ancestral spirit or guardian of the farm. This creature is imagined as a small bearded man, ancient and strong, who watches over the welfare of the livestock and the luck of the house. He is a benevolent but temperamental roommate. If treated with respect, he ensures the cows milk well and the roof does not leak. If ignored, he might sour the milk or hide the tools. This ritual is not a grand religious ceremony. It is a domestic contract. It acknowledges that the humans are not the only owners of this space. There is a sense of cozy superstition. The shadows in the corners are not empty. They are inhabited by the protective spirits of the ancestors. The carved dragon heads on the pillars seem to watch the sleepers with wooden eyes. The house is alive. By feeding the spirit, the Jarl weaves a net of magical protection around the hall. He whispers a few words of thanks into the darkness, bows his head. The bowl sits in the shadows, a silent pact between the living and the dead, ensuring that the luck of the clan remains strong through the dark hours of the night. The preservation of the flame is a sacred duty that continues even as the collective consciousness of the household drifts into slumber. The fire is not merely a source of heat, it is the living heart of the Longhouse, a captive spirit that must be fed and tended lest it abandon the clan to the freezing dark. A designated firekeeper, often an older thrall or a grandmother who sleeps lightly, rises from her furs in the silence of the middle watch. She moves through the hall with the silent, shuffling gait of one who knows every uneven patch of the earthen floor. She approaches the long hearth, which has now burned down to a vast, shimmering bed of dragon-red coals. It breathes a steady, pulsing heat that radiates against her shins. She does not add fresh logs, for the goal now is not a blaze, but preservation. She takes a long iron poker, the metal blackened and pitted by a lifetime of heat, and gently rakes the embers together, consolidating their strength. She then performs the banking of the fire. She takes a scoop of grey, powdery ash from the edge of the pit and carefully smothers the glowing core. This seems counterintuitive, but it is a vital act of insulation. The ash blanket traps the heat inside the coals, allowing them to smolder slowly until morning without burning out. The light in the hall dims instantly, dropping from a warm orange glow to a deep cavernous twilight. The smell of the disturbed ash dry, acrid, and dusty briefly mixes with the scent of the sleeping bodies. Satisfied that the heart of the house is safe, she returns to her bench. The fire sleeps under its grey blanket, a dormant beast waiting to be poked back into roaring life when the first rooster crows, ensuring the continuity of warmth from one day to the next. Interspersed among the sleeping humans, filling the gaps between the bodies and the benches, are the canine guardians of the farm. These are the Norwegian elk hounds, sturdy, fearless dogs with thick silver-grey coats that are double-layered to repel the snow and the damp. In the summer, they are the hunters of moose and bear, but in the winter, they are the living hot water bottles of the clan. They do not sleep in a separate kennel, they sleep in the pile. A large male dog, his fur dense and coarse to the touch, curls up at the feet of the Jarl, his chin resting heavily on the master's ankle. Another squeezes in between two children, acting as a furry barrier against the draft. The heat radiating from their bodies is significant, a dry animal warmth that smells of clean fur and pine forest. Their presence adds a layer of acoustic security to the hall. Even in deep sleep, their triangular ears are twitching, rotating like radar dishes to scan the sounds of the night. They filter out the harmless noises, the settling of the roof beams, the snore of a sleeper, the crackle of the hearth, but they are tuned to the frequency of danger. If a wolf were to scratch at the door, or a stranger's footstep were to crunch on the snow outside, the hall would erupt in a cacophony of barks instantly. But for now, they are silent. Occasionally, a dog will whimper softly in its sleep, its legs twitching as it chases a phantom stag through a dream forest. To the Vikings, dogs are more than tools. They are companions who will accompany their masters even into the afterlife. Sleeping amidst the pack creates a profound sense of primal safety, a feeling that the clan is protected by a ring of teeth and loyalty that never truly sleeps. While the interior of the Longhouse is a womb of warmth and stillness, the world outside has descended into a chaos of elemental fury. It is important to step back mentally and observe the contrast. for it is this dichotomy that defines the Viking winter experience. The storm has intensified. The wind is no longer just moving air, it is a physical solid, screaming down from the polar ice cap, stripping the heat from anything it touches. It batters the turf roof, scouring the snow into sculpted drifts that curve and overhang the eaves like frozen waves. The temperature has dropped to a level where metal sticks to skin and breath turns instantly to ice crystals. Yet, the Longhouse sits in the center of this violence like a boulder in a rushing river. The thick, insulating layers of earth and stone that bank the walls are now covered in snow, blending the house into the landscape until it looks like nothing more than a hillock. The lack of windows, often seen as a primitive feature, is revealed here as a stroke of genius. There are no weak points for the cold to exploit, no glass to shatter, no shutters to rattle. The house presents a sealed, armored carapace to the elements. Inside, the roar of the wind is muffled by the turf and the timber to a dull, distant vibration, a bass note that can be felt in the soles of the feet rather than heard with the ears. This separation is absolute. The thickness of a few feet of wood and dirt is all that separates a tropical microclimate from a lethal freeze. The knowledge of this barrier creates a psychological state of siege comfort. The deeper the snow piles up against the door, the safer and warmer the occupants feel. In the quiet dark, the minds of the sleepers drift away from the physical world and enter the landscape of dreams. To the Viking mind, the dream world is not a place of random firing synapses, but a realm of prophecy and spirit travel. They believe that the hugger, the soul or thought, can detach itself from the body during sleep and wander the world. Under the vaulted roof, 50 souls are journeying together. The imagery of their dreams is shaped by the carvings that surrounded them in the waking hours. In their sleep, the wooden serpents on the pillars uncoil and slither through dark waters. The world tree, Yggdrasil, which holds the 9 worlds in its branches, grows up through the smoke hole, its roots tangling with the sleepers. A grandmother dreams of the Norns spinning the thread of her grandchild's life, the spindle whirring like the one she hears every evening. A warrior dreams of the Valkyries, not in fear, but as a familiar part of the cosmic order. These dreams are not private and isolated, they are culturally shared. The symbols of their mythology are as real to them as the wooden benches they sleep on. There is a sense of a collective unconscious hovering in the smoky air above the rafters. If a man wakes with a start, recounting a vision of a dark wolf or a breaking wave, the others will listen intently in the morning, taking it as a sign for the whole clan. But tonight, the dreams are mostly peaceful, born of full bellies and warmth. They are dreams of spring thaw, of green pastures, and of ships cutting through calm blue waters. Visions of the sun that lie waiting on the other side of the long, dark winter. The sensory experience of the sleeper in the Longhouse is defined by weight and texture. In the modern world, we often seek weightless, airy bedding, but here, comfort is equated with heaviness. The sleeper is anchored to the bed by layers of substantial material. The base layer, the linen undertunic, is soft and worn smooth by constant use, warm against the skin. Over this lies the Vadmor blanket, the coarse woolen fabric that is scratchy but incredibly warm, trapping a layer of air next to the body. Finally, the furs add a crushing, comforting weight. The bearskin or the sheepskin presses down with a gentle, evenly distributed pressure that calms the nervous system and induces a deep, coma-like slumber. It feels like being hugged by the earth itself. The texture of the fur against the cheek is soft and oily, smelling of the animal it once was. The air they breathe is thick and rich. It is not the dry, sterilized air of central heating, but humid air, laden with the moisture of breath, the steam from the cooking pot, and the lingering smoke. It tastes of oak and peat. It coats the throat and warms the lungs. There is also the tactile sensation of the vibration of the house, The timber frame is a living thing, expanding and contracting slightly with the temperature changes, transmitting the vibrations of the wind and the fire. To sleep here is to be held in a warm, dark, textured embrace, swaddled in the organic materials of the forest and the flock, suspended in a state of total physical security while the white death prowls outside the walls in vain. The acoustic environment of the sleeping longhouse is a complex, layered symphony that shifts and changes as the storm outside evolves. The timber frame of the building acts as a giant resonance chamber, amplifying and filtering the sounds of the night. The massive oak pillars, rooted deep in the earth, are under constant tension from the weight of the sod roof and the force of the wind. They speak in a language of deep, resonant groans, a low-frequency cree that travels through the wood like a slow shudder. It is not the sharp crack of breaking timber, but the settling sound of a structure that is flexing and holding firm. High above, at the ridge of the roof, the wind plays across the open smoke holes like a musician blowing across the top of a bottle. It creates a hollow, mournful hooting sound, a ghostly flute music that rises and falls with the gusts. Yet, because the holes are baffled to prevent the snow from entering, the sound is distant, a reminder of the cold that cannot touch the sleepers. Beneath these structural sounds lies the organic soundtrack of the clan. The collective breathing of 50 people and a dozen animals creates a white noise, a steady shushing sound that fills the silence. There is the occasional rustle of dry straw as a cow shifts in the byre, or the soft thump of a dog rearranging itself on the floor. These sounds are the heartbeat of the house. They are the acoustic signals of life and safety. To lie in the dark and listen to this choir of wood and breath is to feel completely enclosed, wrapped in a blanket of sound that muffles the chaos of the universe and reduces the world to a single, safe, vibrating room. In the deepest part of the night, a young man wakes with a sudden, sharp thirst, a common side effect of the salty pork and the smoke-thickened air. He sits up slowly on the platform, his movements silent on the furs. The hall is a landscape of shadows, illuminated only by the faint, pulsing red glow of the banked hearth. He swings his legs over the edge of the bench. His bare feet touch the earthen floor. The clay is cool, smooth, and hard-packed, a shocking contrast to the warmth of the bed. He navigates the room by memory, stepping over the sleeping forms of the thralls and the dogs with the grace of a cat. He moves toward the water barrel that stands near the door. The water inside is kept from freezing by the ambient heat of the room, but it is ice cold. He picks up the ladle, a cup carved from a birch burl with a long handle. He dips it into the dark water. Glug, splash, breaking the stillness. He lifts the ladle to his lips and drinks. The water tastes of the mountain stream it came from, sharp, mineral-rich, and incredibly refreshing. It washes away the smoke and the salt. As he stands there, he can feel the cold radiating from the heavy door just a few feet away. He can hear the wind scratching at the wood like a wild animal trying to get in. He is standing on the border between the tropical warmth of the clan and the lethal freeze of the storm. He shivers, not just from the cold, but from the realization of how fragile their safety is. He drinks again, then hangs the ladle back on the rim of the barrel with a soft clack. He retreats quickly to the warmth of his furs, burrowing back into the pile, the memory of the cold water lingering on his tongue as he drifts back into the heat. While the meat hangs in the rafters, the ground level of the longhouse is home to a different kind of alchemy, the slow, silent magic of fermentation. Along the walls, in the cooler zones away from the fire, stand rows of heavy wooden vats and barrels. These are the chemistry sets of the Viking Age. Inside them, biological processes are taking place that turn perishables into winter staples. One large vat holds the sky, a thick, sour dairy product similar to yogurt. The milk from the summer pastures was skimmed, heated, and cultured with old curds, then packed into this barrel to sour. It has a tangy, acidic smell that cuts through the smoke, a scent of clean bacteria and preservation. In another barrel, cabbage leaves are fermenting in brine, turning into sauerkraut, a vital source of vitamins when the fresh greens are buried under snow. There are barrels of ale, the yeast slowly consuming the sugars of the malted barley, bubbling gently in the dark. Bloop, bloop, bloop. This is the living food. The hall is not just a dormitory, it is a laboratory. The organisms in these barrels are working while the humans sleep, fighting off the rot and the mold, converting the harvest into forms that will last until the spring. The smell of these fermentations, sour, yeasty, and sharp, is a constant background note in the olfactory landscape of the house. It means that the biology of the farm is under control, that the microscopic allies of the clan are hard at work, ensuring that even if the snow lasts for months, there will be sustenance to draw from the wood and the way. Lining the walls above the sleeping platforms, hung on sturdy wooden pegs driven into the oak staves, are the instruments of the clan's defense. This is the shield wall of the interior. The round shields, 3 feet across, overlap each other like the scales of a dragon. They are made of linden wood, light but tough, and rimmed with rawhide that has been stitched with leather thongs. In the dim light of the embers, they look like giant, unblinking eyes watching over the sleepers. Some are painted in spirals of red and white, others are solid black or blue. They are not currently tools of war, but elements of architecture and insulation, adding another layer of wood between the sleepers and the cold wall. Leaning against the pillars are the spears, their long ash shafts rising into the shadows of the roof, their iron tips glinting faintly when a log settles in the fire. The swords hang in their scabbards, peace-bonded with cords to ensure they cannot be drawn in anger during a feast. Seeing these weapons in the context of the sleeping family changes their meaning. They are not symbols of aggression here. They are symbols of capacity. They represent the ability of the household to protect itself. The metal is cold and hard, a stark contrast to the soft furs and the warm flesh, but the two are inextricably linked. The soft life of the longhouse is only possible because of the hard edge of the iron. The weapons sleep too, their violence dormant, acting as silent steel sentinels that guard the peace of the hall as effectively as the stone walls guard against the wind. The night drifts into the wolf hour, that deep psychological trench between 3 and 4 in the morning, when the sun is furthest away and the human spirit is said to be at its lowest ebb. In the Viking worldview, this is the time when the trolls and the draugr, the walking dead, are most active. The darkness inside the hall is absolute now, save for the faintest dull red pulse from the ash-covered fire. The silence has deepened. The wind outside seems to have dropped slightly, or perhaps the sleepers have simply become deaf to it. This is the time of heavy, dreamless sleep, a comatose state where the body repairs itself from the hard labor of the day. The breathing of the room slows down, becoming deeper and more unified. It is a moment of profound vulnerability. If the roof were to collapse or the fire to go out, they would be helpless. Yet the atmosphere is not one of fear, but of trust. They trust the timber to hold. They trust the firekeeper to wake. They trust the dogs to hear. This collective trust creates a tangible heaviness in the air, a spiritual gravity that holds everyone to their beds. It is a time of suspension where time seems to stop completely. The spinning wheels are still, the loom is silent, the cooking pots are cold. The entire universe has contracted to this single warm, breathing box of wood buried in the snow. They are a capsule of life floating in the void of the winter night, waiting with infinite patience for the turning of the earth to bring them back around to the side of the light. Long before the sun even considers cresting the horizon to banish the polar night, the biological clock of the longhouse begins to tick. The first signal of the approaching morning does not come from the humans, but from the animals in the byre. The livestock possess an internal rhythm that is attuned to the milking hour, regardless of the darkness outside. It begins with the heavy, shifting weight of the cattle rising from their knees in the straw. The sound is a low, rhythmic thudding against the packed earth. Then comes the sound of a horse blowing air through its nostrils, a loud, fluttering snort that echoes in the quiet hall. The smell of the byre intensifies. During the night the scent was dormant, but now, with the movement of the beasts, the ammonia tang of fresh manure, and the sweet, dusty smell of crushed hay waft over the partition. It is an earthy, pungent alarm clock. A rooster, kept in a wicker cage near the warmth of the hearth to prevent his comb from freezing, senses the shift in energy. He does not crow with the full-throated roar of summer, but gives a strangled, raspy croak, a tentative announcement that the cycle of sleep is concluding. The dogs hear this first. They uncurl from the heaps of fur, stretching their spines in long, bowing arcs, their claws clicking on the floorboards. They shake themselves, flap, 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 sending a vibration through the sleeping platforms. The deep, unified breathing of the clan begins to fragment. The rhythm breaks. Someone coughs. Another rolls over with a groan of waking joints. The heavy, monolithic silence of the wolf hour is fractured by these small, domestic sounds of biology reasserting itself. The hall is still pitch black, save for the faint red eye of the banked fire. But the atmosphere has changed. The suspension is over. The stillness of the void has been replaced by the restless anticipation of the day, as the great wooden ship of the Longhouse prepares to launch its crew back into the waking world. The resurrection of the light is the first official act of the new day. The firekeeper, who has dozed lightly on her bench with one ear open to the wind, rises fully now. She moves to the central hearth, her breath pluming in the chill morning air that has settled near the floor. The hall is at its coldest point. The heat of the evening has dissipated into the rafters, leaving a crisp, biting chill that nips at the fingers. She kneels by the ash-covered mound. With the iron poker, she breaks the grey crust she made the night before. Crunch, slide. The ash falls away to reveal the coals, which have glowed faithfully through the dark hours, now a deep, sullen cherry red. They pulsate with a faint heat. She takes a handful of tinder fungus, dried mushrooms soaked in nitrate-rich urine and dried again, and places it on the embers. She blows gently. A thin wisp of smoke curls up, then a tiny tongue of flame licks out. She feeds this infant fire with curls of birch bark, which contain natural oils that catch instantly with a bright, crackling snap. The sudden flare of yellow light is blinding in the darkness, throwing her shadow tall and distorted against the roof beams. She adds split logs of pine, then heavier oak. The fire begins to roar, a hollow, sucking sound as it draws the cold air of the hall into its heart and sends it rushing up to the smoke hole. The light spreads, chasing the shadows back into the corners. It catches the gold armoring of the sleeping Jarl, the iron rim of a shield, and the white teeth of a yawning dog. The temperature begins to climb, slowly but perceptibly. The smell of fresh wood smoke replaces the stale air of the night. It is the incense of the morning, a sharp, resinous signal that the sun, though invisible, has returned to the world, represented here by its proxy in the fire pit. As the warmth spreads, the household begins to stir in earnest. The process of waking and dressing in a Viking Longhouse is a study in efficiency and layering. There is no privacy for this ritual, nor is any sort. Modesty is a luxury of warmer climates. The men and women sit up in their furs, rubbing the sleep from their eyes. They slide out from the heavy blankets, their skin immediately prickling in the cool air. The first layer is already on, the linen undertunic or sark, which serves as both nightwear and underwear. Over this they pull on the woolen tunic, the kirtle. The wool is thick, dyed in muted earth tones of madder red, woad blue or natural sheep grey. It is scratchy, but vital. They pull on trousers of woven wool or leather, binding them tight to the leg with long strips of fabric, called leg wrappings or winigas. These are wound from the ankle to the knee in a spiral pattern, providing support and insulation, much like modern compression gear. Then come the socks, made of needle-bound wool, now binding, a technique that creates a dense, indestructible fabric that does not unravel. Finally, the shoes, simple turned shoes made of goatskin, soft and pliable, tied with leather thongs. But the Vikings are not unkempt barbarians. They are fastidious groomers. From pouches and chests combs appear. These are prized possessions, carved from the antlers of red deer, consisting of a handle and a set of composite tooth plates riveted together. The men comb their beards and their long hair, removing the tangles of sleep. They use small ear spoons of silver or bone to clean their ears. They wash their faces in a basin of icy water brought from the barrel, gasping as the cold liquid hits their skin. This grooming is a statement of civilization. Even here, trapped in the snow, they maintain the dignity of their appearance, smoothing the chaos of the night into the order of the day. With the bodies clothed and the fire roaring, the collective attention turns to the dagmar, the day meal. There are only 2 meals in the Viking day, one now and one in the evening. So this sustenance must provide the fuel for the entire daylight period. The great iron cauldron is swung back over the flames. It is not emptied of the previous night's residue, but topped up with fresh ingredients, creating a perpetual stew that evolves over the winter. Today, however, the focus is on grotto porridge. A woman pours a sack of coarse ground barley meal into the boiling water. She adds a generous pinch of salt from a wooden box, a valuable commodity that must be rationed. She stirs it with a spurtle, a wooden stick designed to prevent lumps. Bubble, loop, bubble. The porridge thickens into a grey, gluey mass. It is not exciting food, but it is dense with carbohydrates. To make it palatable, and to add the necessary calories for the cold, a massive pat of butter is added to the center of the pot, melting into a golden pool of fat. Beside the fire, dried herrings are being toasted on flat stones. The heat blisters their skin and releases a pungent, oily aroma that mixes with the mild scent of the barley. The meal is served in wooden bowls turned from alder wood. Everyone. The Jarl eats the same porridge as the thrall, though perhaps his bowl is carved with finer knots and his portion has more butter. They eat with horn spoons, scraping the bowls clean. There is little conversation during the meal. The focus is on the intake of energy. They eat quickly, efficiently, fueling the biological engines that keep them warm. The hot food sits heavy and comforting in the stomach, a glowing coal of internal heat that radiates outward to the fingers and toes, fortifying them against the day. The final act of the morning ritual is the assessment of the enemy. The storm has raged all night, but now the sound of the wind has changed from a scream to a whimper. The Jarl stands and walks to the great door at the gable end of the hall. He signals to 2 strong men to help him. The bar of ash wood is lifted, thud, and the iron latch is raised. They push against the heavy timber planks. The door resists at first, frozen to the frame and blocked by the drift, but with a unified heave it cracks open. The light that floods in is blinding. It is not the golden light of the sun, but the harsh, flat, white light of the snow glare. The men squint, their eyes watering in the sudden brilliance. The world outside has been transformed. The familiar farmyard is gone, replaced by a smooth, undulating sculpture of white. The snow has drifted halfway up the door, forming a rampart that must be dug away. The silence is profound. The white silence has swallowed the landscape. The trees are bowed under the weight of the snow, looking like white statues. The sky is a pale, hard blue, clear and mercilessly cold. The storm has passed, leaving behind a frozen, paralyzed world. The Jarl steps out onto the threshold, his boots crunching in the fresh powder. He takes a deep breath, The air is so cold it burns the nose hairs and freezes the moisture in his mustache instantly. He looks at the roof. It is holding. He looks at the storehouse. It is buried, but intact. He nods. The Longhouse has won. The siege is broken. He turns back to the warmth of the hall, the silhouette of his figure framed by the blinding white rectangle of the door, and issues the first commands of the day. The waiting is over. The digging out must begin. The final act of the morning ritual is the assessment of the enemy. The storm has raged all night, but now the sound of the wind has changed from a scream to a whimper. The Jarl stands and walks to the great door at the gable end of the hall. He signals to two strong men to help him. The bar of ash wood is lifted, thud, and the iron latch is raised. They push against the heavy timber planks. The door resists at first, frozen to the frame and blocked by the drift, but with a unified heave it cracks open. The light that floods in is blinding. It is not the golden light of the sun, but the harsh, flat, white light of the snow glare. The men squint, their eyes watering in the sudden brilliance. The world outside has been transformed. The familiar farmyard is gone, replaced by a smooth, undulating sculpture of white. The snow has drifted halfway up the door, forming a rampart that must be dug away. The silence is profound. The white silence has swallowed the landscape. The trees are bowed under the weight of the snow, looking like white statues. The sky is a pale, hard blue, clear and mercilessly cold. The storm has passed, leaving behind a frozen, paralyzed world. The Jarl steps out onto the threshold, his boots crunching in the fresh powder. He takes a deep breath. The air is so cold it burns the nose hairs and freezes the moisture in his mustache instantly. He looks at the roof. It is holding. He looks at the storehouse. It is buried but intact. He nods. The Longhouse has won. The siege is broken. He turns back to the warmth of the hall, the silhouette of his figure framed by the blinding white rectangle of the door, and issues the first commands of the day. The waiting is over. The digging out must begin. While the men fight the snow outside, the women inside engage in a task that is the very definition of monotony and sustenance, the grinding of the grain. In a corner of the hall, away from the drafts, sits the rotary quern. This is a heavy, circular stone hand mill, the beating heart of the daily bread. Two women sit facing each other across the stone, their legs extended. The device consists of a stationary bottom stone and a rotating upper stone, turned by a wooden handle. One woman feeds the roasted barley kernels into the central hole, the eye of the quern, while the other turns the handle. Rumble, grind, rumble. The sound is a low, continuous growl of stone crushing stone. It is a hypnotic, vibration-heavy sound that travels through the floorboards. As the stone turns, a fine grayish flour spills out from the gap between the stones, collecting on a linen cloth spread beneath. The air in this corner becomes hazy with flour dust, which dances in the shafts of light falling from the smoke hole. The smell is dry and earthy, the scent of pulverized grain. The work is hard on the shoulders and the back, but the rhythm is soothing. The women often sing quern songs as they work, low, rhythmic chants that match the speed of the rotation, synchronizing their efforts. These songs tell of giants grinding gold or the sea grinding salt, connecting their domestic labor to the cosmic myths of their people. The pile of flour grows slowly, a soft, pale pyramid that represents the security of the next meal. It is a slow, ancient process of transformation, turning the hard, inedible seeds of the summer harvest into the soft, nourishing staple of the winter diet. Near the fire, the education of the next generation takes place, not with books or parchment, but with wood and knife. An elder, perhaps a grandfather whose fighting days are done but whose mind remains sharp, sits with a young boy on a sheepskin. He holds a smooth stick of beechwood, the rune stick. He is teaching the boy the Futhark, the runic alphabet of the Norsemen. He cuts a shape into the wood with the tip of his knife, a vertical line with two diagonal branches. Fehu, he says softly, cattle, wealth. The boy repeats the word, tracing the groove with his small finger. The sound of the knife is a precise, delicate scritch against the grain. The shavings curl away like tiny ribbons falling onto the fur. This is not merely an alphabet. It is a magical system. To carve a rune is to invoke the concept it represents. The elder explains that Fehu is not just a cow, it is the concept of mobile property, of success, of the responsibility of the Jarl to be generous. The boy takes the knife, his hand trembling slightly with the effort of control, and tries to copy the mark. The elder guides his hand. The smell of the fresh beechwood is clean and sharp, cutting through the smoke. There is a profound patience in this scene. In a culture without mass literacy, knowledge is a precious liquid poured from one vessel to another. The firelight flickers on the carved symbols, making them seem to move and deepen. The transmission of this knowledge ensures that the boy will one day be able to carve his name on a sword, mark his property on a comb, or cut a message of love or war onto a stick to be carried across the sea. The structural integrity of the Longhouse is a constant concern, and the daylight hours are the time for inspection. The Jarl moves through the hall, his eyes scanning the walls with the critical gaze of an engineer. He checks the stave construction, the vertical timbers that form the shell of the house. The cold of the winter causes the wood to contract, and he is looking for daylight. If a gap is opened between the planks, it must be sealed. He carries a bucket of caulking, a mixture of moss, animal hair, and tar. When he finds a draft, he presses a handful of the sticky, fibrous mixture into the crack, using a wooden wedge to hammer it home. Tap, tap, seal. The draft stops instantly. He checks the massive support pillars, looking for signs of stress or rot near the base where they meet the earth. He climbs a ladder to the loft to inspect the roof. From the inside, the roof is a complex weave of birch bark, sheets, and wooden laths. He looks for damp spots that might indicate the snow is melting and leaking through. The smell up here is intense, with the scent of the smoked meat hanging nearby. He pushes a stick against the bark. It is firm. The weight of the snow outside is actually helping to compress the roof materials, making them tighter. He is satisfied. The maintenance of the hall is a war against it. The wind wants to tear the roof off. The rot wants to eat the beams. The cold wants to split the timber. By constant vigilance, by the application of tar and moss and labor, the Jarl keeps the fortress intact. It is a quiet, tactile relationship between the man and his house, a mutual agreement of protection. The Nordic winter day is incredibly short. By the early afternoon, the sun, which barely skimmed the southern horizon, begins to dip back below the edge of the world. The light outside shifts rapidly from the harsh white of noon to a deep, bruising purple, and then to the ink black of the true night. The transition is swift, a curtain being drawn across the sky. The men outside finish their tasks and retreat back into the hall, stomping the snow from their boots in the entryway. The door is barred once more. Thud, clack, sealing the capsule against the return of the dark. The atmosphere inside shifts immediately. The long fires are built up again, transitioning from the cooking heat of the day to the light-giving blaze of the evening. The transition is psychological as well as physical. The focus moves from... The women put away the quern stones and cover the flour. The tools are... The hall fills up with people again. The density of the bodies restoring the humidity and the warmth that was lost during the comings and goings of the day. The smell of the evening meal begins to rise. This time it is likely fish, the stockfish soaked all day in water to rehydrate it, now stewing with butter and onions. The return of the darkness brings the clan back to the hearth, drawing them in like moths to a flame. The Hygge returns, deeper now for having been broken by the cold duties of the day. They have survived the storm, they have cleared the snow, and now they have earned another long night of warmth and stories in the belly of the wooden whale. The evening meal, or nattverda, marks the definitive end of the day's labor and the beginning of the night's rest. The central feature of this meal is the stockfish, the staple that has sustained the Norse people through centuries of frozen winters. The dried cod, stiff as a board earlier in the day, has been hammered to break the fibers and then soaked in fresh water until it is reconstituted into white, flaky meat. It is boiled gently in the iron cauldron, releasing a savory steam that smells of the salt sea and the clean north wind. It is served simply, for the Viking palate prizes the quality of the ingredients over complex spices. A generous ladle of the fish is placed into each wooden bowl, followed by a pour of melted butter, golden and rich, which pools around the white flakes. Boiled leeks and perhaps a handful of late-season turnips, stored in sand to keep them fresh, add a sweetness to the dish. The texture is firm and chewy, requiring deliberate mastication, which itself is a rhythmic, calming act. The hall is filled with the sound of eating, the soft clatter of horn spoons against wood, the tearing of flatbread, and the satisfied sighs of a hungry workforce. This is soul food, in its most literal sense. It is the protein of the ocean harvested in the spring to save the people in the winter. The warmth of the stew spreads through the body, reaching the cold extremities, inducing a heavy, pleasant lethargy. The Jarl shares his portion with his favorite hound, tossing a piece of fish which is snapped up in mid-air. The shared meal reinforces the bond of the fjelag, the fellowship of the hall. They are all fed from the same pot, warmed by the same fire, and protected by the same roof. The bellies are full, the hunger is vanquished, and the body prepares to shut down for the long, dark watch of the night. In the relaxation that follows the meal, the lady of the house settles onto her cushioned bench to engage in a craft of exquisite precision, tablet weaving. This is not the large physical labor of the warp-weighted loom, but a delicate mathematical art used to create the decorative trim for tunics and cloaks. She holds a deck of small, square tablets carved from bone, each pierced with 4 holes at the corners. Through these holes pass threads of dyed wool and imported silk, brilliant crimson, woad blue, and weld yellow. The warp threads are tied to her belt at one end and to a fixed post at the other, creating a taut, horizontal loom that spans her lap. She manipulates the tablets with practiced speed, turning them a quarter turn forward or backward in a complex sequence. Click, clack, turn. With each turn, the shed of the threads changes, twisting the fibers together to form a strong, narrow band. She passes the weft thread through, beating it tight with a small wooden knife. The pattern that emerges is incredibly intricate, a geometric design of running wolves or twisting vines that seems to grow magically from her fingertips. The sound of the tablets clicking together is a soft, rhythmic percussion, like the ticking of a slow clock. It is a mesmerizing process to watch. The threads dance and twist, the colors submerging and re-emerging in the weave. This band will eventually adorn the neckline of the Jarl, a symbol of his status and her skill. In the dim firelight, her concentration is absolute, her eyes following the microscopic geometry of the threads, her mind occupied by the silent counting of the turns, creating beauty in the heart of the winter darkness. On a bench nearby, a trader who is wintering with the clan occupies his hands with the gold of the north, amber. He has a pouch filled with raw nodules of the fossilized resin gathered from the beaches of the Baltic Sea after the autumn storms. He selects a piece, rough and crusted with sea sediment, and begins to polish it. He uses a piece of woolen cloth and a paste made of fine abrasive ash and oil. He rubs the stone in a circular motion. Rub, rub, rub. The friction generates heat, and as the amber warms, it releases a faint pine forest scent, a ghostly memory of the ancient trees from which it bled millions of years ago. Slowly, the dull crust wears away, revealing the glowing, honey-colored gem beneath. It catches the firelight, holding the orange glow within its heart like a trapped sun. He holds it up to the candle, checking for clarity. Inside, a tiny gnat is suspended in eternal preservation, a flawless captive of time. The trader works with a slow, obsessive patience. He is smoothing the rough edges, shaping it into a bead or a gaming piece. The tactile sensation is pleasing. The amber feels warm and alive to the touch, unlike the coldness of stone or metal. When he rubs it against his wool tunic, it builds up a static charge, attracting bits of chaff and hair, a phenomenon the Vikings view as a mild form of magic. This polishing is a soothing, repetitive task that requires no thought, only a rhythmic motion of the hand. It is a way of processing the raw wealth of the world, refining the rough gifts of the sea into the smooth, warm jewels that will be traded for silver in the markets of the south when the ice finally melts. As the fire burns down, the conversation turns to the past. This is not the performance of the skald this time, but the recitation of the Langfedgatal, the genealogy of the clan. An elder begins to speak, his voice low and monotonous, a drone that is designed to preserve memory rather than entertain. He recites the lineage of the Jarl, tracing the bloodline back through the generations. He was the son of Thorstein, who was the son of Bjorn the Strong, who was the son of Ketil Flatnose. The names roll on, a rhythmic litany of ancestors. The listeners drift in and out of the recitation. It is a comforting sound, a verbal anchor that connects the people in the hall to a continuous chain of life that stretches back to the mythical past. The elder tells brief anecdotes about each name, how one cleared the forest, how another survived a shipwreck. These are not grand myths, but the small, hard truths of survival. The recitation affirms that the clan has endured winters like this before. It affirms that they are the survivors of survivors. The names hang in the smoky air, filling the room with the ghosts of the forefathers. To the sleepy children, the names are like a lullaby, a boring but reassuring list that tells them exactly who they are and where they belong. The Jarl listens with his eyes closed, nodding slightly at the mention of his grandfather. It is a grounding ritual, a weaving of the social fabric that is as important as the weaving of the wool. The voice of the elder is steady and unhurried, walking down the long road of history, step by step, name by name, into the silence of the night. The night has now fully reclaimed the Longhouse. The activities of the evening, the eating, the weaving, the polishing, the storytelling, have all slowly wound down, like a spinning top losing its momentum. The firekeeper has banked the hearth once more, covering the red eye of the fire with its grey eyelid of ash. The darkness rushes back in, filling the void. The family retreats to the sleeping platforms. The transition is seamless. The transition from the vertical world of the day to the horizontal world of the night is complete. The furs are pulled up, the bodies are arranged, and the great communal sleep begins again. The heat in the hall is at its peak. The accumulated warmth of the cooking and the fires trapped by the turf roof. It is a thick atmosphere, heavy and soporific. The dogs find their places in the pile, adding their rhythmic breathing to the human chorus. Outside, the sky has cleared. The stars are hard, diamond points of light in the black void, looking down on the snow-covered mound that hides the life within. There is no wind tonight. The silence of the white world is absolute. Inside the wooden shell, the clan floats in a warm, dark suspension. They are safe. The storehouse is full. The walls are strong. The lineage is remembered. They drift away into the velvet dark, 50 souls traveling together through the night, held in the cupped hands of the Longhouse, waiting for the sun to rise again on the glittering, frozen world of the north. The structural anatomy of the Longhouse is a marvel of resourcefulness, designed to withstand the brutal forces of the Scandinavian climate. The roof, a massive sloping entity, is supported by a series of truss-like structures. The beams are often naturally curved timbers, selected from trees that grew on wind-swept hillsides, their bent shapes providing inherent strength against the downward pressure of the snow. These timbers, known as crux, form an A-frame arch that transfers the weight of the roof directly into the ground. This means the walls do not bear the load, allowing them to be built of lighter materials like wattle and daub in milder climates, or thick, insulating turf in the north. The joinery is entirely devoid of metal nails, which would rust and snap in the cold. Instead, the Vikings used wooden trenails, pegs of dry oak that expand when driven into the green wood of the beams, locking the joint together with a grip that tightens over time. The entire structure is flexible, designed to move and breathe with the wind rather than resist it rigidly. In the quiet of the night, you can almost sense the tension in these beams, the silent muscular effort that holds the tons of earth and snow suspended above the sleeping clan. It is a protective rib cage of wood, an organic skeleton that houses the soft, warm heart of the household. In the depths of the night, the concept of time in the longhouse becomes fluid and subjective. Without the sun to mark the hours, the passage of the night is measured in the burning rate of a log, or the cycle of the guard. A young man sits by the door, taking his turn at the night watch. He is not guarding against armies, but against the elemental threats. A spark jumping from the fire, a wolf digging at the byre wall, or the accumulation of snow blocking the smoke hole. He holds a small knife, whittling a piece of driftwood to stay awake. The shavings fall to the floor in a slow, hypnotic rhythm. He watches the fire breathe, the glow intensifying and fading with the draught. He listens to the breathing of his kin. In this solitude, his mind wanders to the sagas, the stories of heroes and monsters that shape his reality. He imagines the Fenris wolf straining against his chains, or the Midgard serpent stirring in the deep ocean. These are not abstract myths to him, but the physics of his world. The darkness beyond the door is the realm of the chaotic forces, the giants of frost and darkness. The light inside is the realm of men and order. His vigil is the thin line between the two. He stands up to stretch, his joints popping, and walks softly to the water barrel for a drink. The water is cold and grounding. He returns to his post, a solitary sentry in the wooden cave, guarding the sleep of the tribe. The presence of the ancestors is a tangible feeling in the longhouse, reinforced by the artifacts that adorn the space. High on the central pillar, above the Jarl's seat, hangs a mask carved from bog oak. It is black and ancient, with hollow eyes and a grimacing mouth. It represents the founder of the farm, the man who first cleared this land of stones and trees. It watches over the whole with a stern, protective gaze. On a shelf nearby sits a drinking horn rimmed with silver, passed down through 5 generations. It is chipped and stained with the mead of 100 feasts. These objects are heirlooms in the truest sense. They weave the past into the present. The sleepers are surrounded by the physical touch of their forefathers, the tools they used during the day. The axes, the looms, the knives were lightly held by hands that are now dust. This continuity creates a sense of immortality. The individual life is short and fragile, easily snuffed out by a fever or a storm, but the clan endures. The longhouse itself is a ship sailing through time, carrying the family line forward. In the quiet dark, the boundary between the living and the dead feels thin. The breath of the sleepers mixes with the memories of the dead, a single continuous exhalation of the family spirit that fills the hall with a heavy, comforting atmosphere of belonging. The relationship between the Viking and the forest is one of deep, respectful extraction, visible in every timber of the hall. To build such a structure required the felling of hundreds of mature oak trees, a deforestation that changed the landscape for miles. But the wood was not taken lightly. The Vikings practiced coppicing and pollarding, managing the forest to produce the straight, long poles needed for rafters and fences. They understood the language of wood grain. They knew that a plank riven or split along the grain is stronger and more water-resistant than a plank sawn across it. The walls of the longhouse are made of these riven planks, their surfaces shimmering with the natural texture of the medullary rays. Even in the dark, the smell of the house is the smell of the forest, tannins, sap, and cellulose. The house is essentially a reconstructed forest, rearranged to provide shelter. As the wind howls outside, the wood remembers its life as a tree. The pillars groan, remembering the sway of the canopy. The roof beams creak, remembering the weight of the winter snows. The clan is sleeping inside the belly of the woods, protected by the strength of the trees that once shaded their ancestors. This connection to the material world is visceral. They are wrapped in wood, heated by wood, and their dreams are cradled in wood. As the night begins to wane and the wolf hour fades into the pre-dawn greyness, the temperature in the hall reaches its nadir. The fire has burned low, the stones have radiated their heat, and the cold of the earth begins to creep up through the floor. This is the time of huddling. The sleepers instinctively move closer together, closing the gaps in the puppy pile. A mother pulls her cloak tighter around her infant. The dogs burrow deeper into the furs. The condensation from their breath freezes on the nail heads of the door. Yet this cold is not the deadly cold of the outside. It is a manageable chill that makes the warmth of the bedding feel even more luxurious. It is the contrast that defines the comfort. To feel the nip of the frost on the tip of the nose while the body remains toasty warm under a bearskin is a sensory pleasure. It is a reminder of the successful defense against the elements. The longhouse has held. The fire has done its work. The clan has survived the deepest dip of the winter night. In a few hours, the firekeeper will rise, the rooster will croak, and the cycle of heat will begin again. But for now, they enjoy the final, deep embrace of the sleep, floating in the cool, grey dawn, suspended in the safety of the wooden ark. Outside the heavy timber door, the storm has finally exhausted itself, leaving behind a sky of startling, crystalline clarity. The sentry, stepping out to check the drift, witnesses the celestial drama of the Northlios. In the Viking mind, these are not magnetic particles hitting the atmosphere. They are the Bifrost, the bridge to Asgard, or perhaps the glint of the Valkyries' armor as they ride across the sky. The lights ripple across the heavens in curtains of neon green and pale violet, moving with a silent, ghostly fluidity. They fold and twist like celestial silk caught in a cosmic wind. The sentry stands mesmerized, his breath freezing in the air. The light casts a strange, alien glow on the white landscape, turning the snowdrifts into phosphorescent dunes. There is a crackling energy in the air, a static tension that makes the hair on his arms stand up. To stand alone under this display is to feel the scrutiny of the gods. It is beautiful, but also terrifying, a reminder of the vast indifference of the universe. He watches for a moment longer, soaking in the magic, before retreating back into the smoky warmth of the hall. He does not wake the others. This vision is a private gift from the night, a moment of silent communion between the warrior and the weird, shifting lights of the north. The rhythm of the Viking week is anchored by Laugardagur, Saturday, or literally, wash day. Even in the depths of winter, hygiene is a priority that distinguishes the Norsemen from their European contemporaries. On this day, the routine of the longhouse shifts to the bathhouse, a small, separate structure built near the stream. Inside, a pile of stones is heated until they are white-hot in a central fire pit. The men strip off their wool and linen, entering the small, dark room. Water is thrown onto the stones, hiss, roar, exploding into thick, wet steam. The temperature spikes instantly. The men sweat profusely, the heat driving the grime and the smoke from their pores. They beat their skin with bundles of fresh birch twigs to stimulate circulation. The air is thick with the scent of birch oil and hot granite. It is a purification ritual. They sit in the steam, talking, laughing, the social hierarchy dissolving in the nudity of the bath. Then comes the shock. They run out into the snow, rolling in the drifts or plunging into the ice hole in the stream. The thermal shock is agonizing and exhilarating, a reset for the nervous system. They return to the longhouse clean, pink-skinned and revitalized, their hair combed and their bodies scrubbed. This weekly ritual is a defense against the lice and the filth of close-quarters living, a way of maintaining dignity and health in the muddy reality of the farm. Back inside the hall, the leisure time is often occupied by the casting of runes or the rolling of dice. Gambling is a passion of the Northmen. A group of men huddle around a flat stone, shaking a leather cup. The dice are cubes of bone, carved from the knuckles of sheep, marked with dots drilled into the surface. Rattle, rattle, toss. The dice skitter across the stone with a sharp clatter. Groans and cheers erupt. They are betting small things. A silver penny, a knife, a ring, or sometimes just chores. I wager the mucking of the byre. One man laughs. This is not just a game of chance, it is a flirtation with fate. The Vikings believed deeply in word, the personal destiny spun for them at birth. The roll of the die is a way of testing one's current standing with the Norns. Is luck with me today? The sound of the dice is the sound of risk, a small, controlled dose of adrenaline in the safety of the hall. It keeps the mind sharp and the competitive spirit alive. The winner sweeps up the pile of silver. Hack silver, pieces of cut jewelry used as currency, weighing it in his hand with a satisfied grin. The loser shrugs, accepting the verdict of the bones, knowing that the luck can turn as quickly as the wind. The social cohesion of the Longhouse is maintained through the ancient Germanic tradition of gift-giving. The Jarl is known as the ring-giver, and his power rests not just on his sword, but on his generosity. In the quiet of the evening, a formal presentation might take place. The Jarl calls a loyal retainer to the high seat. He takes a heavy arm ring of twisted silver from his own arm. The metal is warm from his skin. He places it on the arm of the warrior. For the shield wall held at the fjord, he says simply, "This is not a salary, it is a bond." The ring represents a transfer of honor and luck. To receive it is to accept a debt of loyalty that can only be repaid in blood or service. The hall watches in silence. The glint of the silver in the firelight is the physical manifestation of the social contract. The weight of the metal on the arm is a constant reminder of the bond. These gifts circulate through the society, binding the men to the leader and the leader to the men. It is an economy of prestige, where hoarding is shameful and giving is glorious. The atmosphere in the hall during these moments is thick with respect and gravity. It is the forging of the human chains that will hold the shield wall together when the summer raiding season begins. As we approach the end of our time in the Longhouse, let us reflect on the sensory totality of this space. It is a vessel of life. To the modern observer, it might seem dark, smoky, and crowded, but to the Viking, it is the ultimate expression of success. It is in Narngard, the inner yard, the place of law, order, and safety. Outside is Utangard, the outer yard, the realm of chaos, trolls, and wild nature. The walls of the Longhouse act as the barrier between these two metaphysical states. Inside, the air is warm, the belly is full, the kin are close, and the stories are told. It is a triumph of human engineering and social organization over the lethal indifference of the North. The fire that burns in the center is the same fire that burns in the hearts of the people, a stubborn, defiant warmth that refuses to be extinguished by the snow. The Longhouse is not just a building, it is a battery, charging the clan with the energy, the rest, and the solidarity they will need to face the world when the sun returns. It is the womb of the Viking Age, the dark, fertile place from which their history is born. We leave them now, safe in their wooden ship, sailing through the winter night, carried on the breath of the ancestors and the warmth of the hearth. As the weeks of the deep winter slowly turn into months, a subtle but profound shift begins to occur in the acoustic landscape of the Longhouse. The relentless howling wind of the storm season begins to lose its edge, replaced by the sound that every northerner longs for, the sound of the thaw. It begins as a rhythmic dripping from the eaves, the massive accumulation of snow on the turf roof warmed by the rising sun and the heat escaping through the smoke holes begins to melt. Drip, drip, drip. It falls onto the stones surrounding the hall, a ticking clock counting down the end of the isolation. Inside, the air changes. The dry, static-charged atmosphere of the frieze becomes humid and earthy. The smell of the thawing mud, the smell of the worm, seeps under the door. It is the scent of the earth waking up. The light that enters the open door during the day is no longer the blue twilight of the polar night, but the true, golden light of the spring sun. It strikes the dust motes dancing in the hall with a new intensity. The mood of the clan lifts perceptibly. The cabin fever, the brooding introspection of the dark months, evaporates like the mist. The men begin to talk of the ships. They bring the rudders and the oars into the hall to inspect them, checking the ash wood for cracks, oiling the leather straps. The Longhouse transforms from a survival bunker into a staging ground. The energy shifts from conservation to preparation. The winter siege is lifting, and the world is opening up once more, promising movement, trade, and the open sea. The surest sign of the changing season is the emptying of the byre. For months, the cattle and the sheep have shared the intimate space of the hall, their breath mingling with the humans, their heat contributing to the survival of the clan. But now the grass is showing green on the south-facing slopes. The day comes to drive them out. The partition is taken down, the great doors are thrown wide open. The animals, blinking in the brightness, hesitant at first after months of confinement, step out onto the mud of the farmyard. The young calves, born in the darkness of the byre, kick up their heels and run for the first time in the fresh air. The effect on the Longhouse is immediate. The space suddenly feels vast, and the heavy, musky smell of the animals begins to fade, replaced by the fresh breeze blowing through the open doors. The floor of the byre is mucked out, a heavy, dirty job, but one that yields the gold of the farm, the manure that will fertilize the barley fields. The silence in the hall is different now. The background rhythm of the chewing and the stamping is gone. It feels quieter, cleaner, but also a little lonelier. The symbiotic huddle is broken. The humans are reclaiming their space, scrubbing the floors with sand and water, purifying the hall for the season of light. It is a moment of expansion, a physical exhaling of the household as it spreads its wings and reoccupies the land outside the walls. With the coming of spring, the thoughts of the household turn to the sea chests. Every free man who intends to go a Viking, which is to say, to go on an expedition of trade or raiding, has his own personal chest. These are sturdy boxes made of oak, bound with iron bands fitted with a heavy lock. They serve a dual purpose. They are the storage trunks for travel, and they serve as the rowing benches on the longship. Inside the hall, the men are packing them. The packing is a ritual of foresight. They pack the sea clothes, tunics of leather and seal skin that can withstand the salt spray. They pack their weapons, cleaned and oiled. They pack their personal trading goods, the amber beads polished by the fire, the combs carved from antler, the furs trapped in the deep woods. They pack the travel food, the hardtack bread and the dried fish that will sustain them on the North Sea. The sound of the heavy lids closing, thud, click, is the sound of departure. The women watch this process with a mix of pride and anxiety. They are packing the chests too, tucking in extra pairs of warm socks, a pouch of dried herbs for sickness, or a small amulet for luck. The hall becomes a transit zone. The static peace of the winter is replaced by the dynamic energy of the voyage. The Longhouse, which was the entire world for the winter, is now just the launch pad for a journey that might take them to the markets of Dublin, the rivers of Russia, or the warm waters of the Mediterranean. Yet before the ships slide into the water, there is one final great gathering in the hall. It is the spring feast, the Sumar Blot. This is the last time the entire clan will be together under one roof before the separations of the summer. The last of the winter stores are brought down from the rafters. The best cask of mead is broached. The fire is built high, not for warmth this time, but for celebration. The atmosphere is boisterous and loud. The Skald tells stories not of the gods, but of the great voyages of the past, inciting the young men to glory. The drinking horns are passed from hand to hand. Toasts are drunk to Njord, the god of the sea, and to Freyr, the god of fertility. But underneath the noise there is a deep, resonant note of gratitude for the house itself. They look up at the blackened beams, the soot-stained roof that sheltered them. They touch the sturdy pillars. This building has saved them. It has held the heat, repelled the snow, and kept the wolf at bay. It is the silent wooden mother of the clan. The feast is a thanksgiving to the architecture of survival. As the night winds down and the fire dies into embers for the last time in its winter configuration, there is a sense of completion. The cycle is finished. They have survived the dark. They are ready for the light. As we prepare to leave this ancient hall, let us consider the legacy of the Longhouse. It is more than just a historical building style. It is a metaphor for the human need for sanctuary. In the modern world, we still seek our own versions of the Longhouse. We seek the hygge, the cozy enclosed safety that protects us from the storms of life. When you curl up in your bed tonight, pulling the heavy duvet up to your chin, you are reenacting the ritual of the Viking sleeper. You are creating a microclimate of warmth in a cold universe. You are banking your own fires. The walls of your room are the staves of the oak. Your roof is the turf and the bark. The safety you feel is the same safety they felt 1,000 years ago. The storm may rage outside, the storms of weather, or stress, or worry, but inside, you are in the Anangard. You are in the inner yard. You are safe. The continuity of this experience connects you to every human who has ever sought shelter from the night. You are part of the great, timeless tradition of finding peace in the dark, held in the secure embrace of your own private sanctuary. The fire in the great central hearth has now burned down to a gentle, pulsing bed of white ash and red coals. The last log has crumbled, its energy spent, releasing a final, faint wisp of sweet wood smoke that drifts up into the shadows of the rafters. The hall is quiet. The loom is still. The tools are packed. The dogs are sleeping deeply, their paws twitching in dreams of the summer hunt. The breathing of the household has slowed to a deep oceanic rhythm, a collective sigh of rest. The heavy timber door is barred and solid, shutting out the world. The vigilance of the sentry has relaxed. There is nothing left to do. The work is finished. The preparations are made. The winter is over. You can feel the silence of the hall wrapping around you like a heavy fur cloak. It is a silence that has weight and texture, a silence that protects. The shadows lengthen and merge, softening the edges of the world, blurring the line between the waking world and the dream world. The Longhouse is drifting now, a great wooden ship floating on the tide of the night, carrying its passengers gently toward the shores of sleep. Let your mind rise up now, floating free from the bench, up through the smoke of the rafters, and out through the smoke hole into the cool night air. Look down at the Longhouse one last time, see it as it truly is. A long, humpbacked shape buried in the snow, glowing faintly from within, a single spark of life in the vast frozen wilderness of the north. Pull back further. See the other farmsteads scattered along the fjord, small islands of warmth in the blue dark. See the ships drawn up on the beach. sleeping under their tarpaulins, waiting for the sea. See the mountains rising behind them, white and majestic, guarding the valley. The world is vast and beautiful and silent. The northern lights are fading now, leaving a sky dusted with a million stars. The earth turns slowly, a giant, slumbering beast. There is no fear here, only the immense, peaceful indifference of nature. You are floating above it all, a silent observer, untethered and weightless. The cold cannot touch you. The wind cannot move you. You are pure consciousness drifting in the starlight, watching over the sleeping world with a gaze of infinite calm. And now, return your attention to your own body, resting in your own bed. Feel the support of the mattress beneath you, solid and reliable as the earth floor of the hall. Feel the weight of your blankets, warm and heavy as the winter furs. You are the Jarl of your own domain. You have barred the door against the worries of the day. You have banked the fires of your mind. You are safe. The storm has passed. There is nothing that requires your attention. The cattle are fed, the wood is chopped, the walls are strong. You have earned this rest. You have navigated the winter of your day, and now you have arrived at the sanctuary of the night. Allow your muscles to release their tension, unlocking the jaw, dropping the shoulders, unclenching the hands. Let the gravity of sleep pull you down, deeper and deeper, into the warm, dark center of your own longhouse. You are protected. You are held. You are at peace. The images of the Viking world begin to fade now. The smell of the wood smoke dissipates. The sound of the wind dies away. The glow of the embers dims. All that remains is the feeling of warmth and safety. You are drifting in a void of comfort. There is no time here, no history, no future. There is only the eternal now of sleep. You are sinking through layers of softness, moving from the light sleep of the evening into the deep restorative sleep of the night. Your breathing is slow and steady, in and out, in and out. It is the rhythm of the tides, the rhythm of the seasons, the rhythm of life itself. You are connected to the deep, slow pulse of the earth. You are heavy, warm, and still. The darkness is not empty. It is a velvet blanket that swaddles you, quieting the mind and soothing the soul. Let go of the last thread of awareness. Let yourself fall into the waiting arms of the dream. And so our chronicle of the Viking Longhouse draws to its close. The wheel has turned. The story is told. The hall sleeps, and the history books are closed. We leave the clan there, suspended in the amber of time, safe in their winter fortress, but the peace they found is yours to keep. Carry the warmth of the hearth into your dreams. Carry the strength of the oak into your rest. The night is yours. The watch is done. You are safe in the sanctuary of the past, and you are safe in the sanctuary of the present. Sleep now, deep and dreamless, knowing that the walls will hold, the fire will keep, and the sun will rise again. Good night.